Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me great pleasure and an honor to welcome you all to our Black History Month Policing While Black Forum that we're going to have today. I'd like to first thank our co-sponsors on this event, Ms. Tensie Taylor and the USC Black Alumni Association, and Chief John Thomas, who you'll meet in a moment, and the USC Department of Public Safety. So it gives me an incredibly great pleasure today to be here as director of the Safe Communities Institute. I'm also a professor of the practice in national and homeland security. The Safe Communities Institute has been at USC for over 70 years. We're engaged in a number of educational programs. We are engaged in research. And of course, most importantly, we are engaged with our community. And with that, I'd like to also mention that if you'd like to know more about us, go to sci.usc.edu for our website. And with that, I'm going to say, as you see the banner behind me for Lewis, it is for our Lewis Registry, named after the Honorable John Lewis, and the acronym stands for Law Enforcement Work Inquiry System. It is a national database we are creating at the Safe Communities Institute for police officers that have been fired for misconduct or resigned due to misconduct, so that we can track these officers and start to change the culture. Today's panel is going to explore the challenges of being a Black officer in today's society and what it's like to face institutional racism and white supremacy from within the police departments. And here we are on the heels of the January 6th insurrection. I think there could be no more timely a conversation about this kind of challenge. So with that, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce my colleague, my partner at USC. We are so fortunate to have him, Chief John Thomas of the USC Department of Public Safety. Chief, it's all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Suthers. And again, it is a pleasure to be a part of this. And I'm looking forward to the lively discussion, offering a very unique perspective that we often don't get an opportunity to hear, the firsthand account of those that are actually in the profession and also working in our communities and oftentimes from our communities. First, I would like to introduce our three panelists and the moderator. And then at the end, I would like to give a very high level overview of just the history of American policing and its roots that are directly linked to the enslavement of Black people in this country. So without further ado, I will introduce the panelists. And our first panelist I'd like to introduce is a member of the Beverly Hills Police Department, Officer Daryl Glover. And it's with great pleasure I also like to say that he began his law enforcement or public safety career here at the University of Southern California Department of Public Safety. Officer Glover grew up in the city of Carson, California here, local. He was a standout basketball player that received a scholarship to Northwestern State University in Oklahoma and graduated with his bachelor's degree in kinesiology. He served approximately 5 years after leaving USC Department of Public Safety, where he was one of our community service officers for about 2 years. And then he went on to the LAPD, where he served for 5 years. For the last few months, he has been a member of the Beverly Hills Police Department. But Daryl Glover is also an distinguished member of our panel today. The second person I'd like to introduce on the panel is Dr. Kalinda Ray. And Dr. Kalinda Ray is a psychologist with the Dallas Police Department. She is a licensed psychologist both in the state of California and in Texas. She earned her bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor in law and society and a master's of marriage and family therapy right here from the University of Southern California. So fight on. She earned her PhD in counseling psychology from Howard University in Washington, D.C. She has worked as a psychologist with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation and with the Veterans Administration. And for the Dallas Police Department, police psychologists play a very major role in the selection of officers and also the chief of police, which is a very important piece to the identification of potential problem officers early on and necessary for weeding them out. So we're very pleased to have Dr. Kalinda Ray as a part of this panel. The third person on the panel is hails from the Santa Monica Police Department. Maurice Sumlin is a sergeant with the Santa Monica Police Department. He has 35 years with the Santa Monica Police Department, and he oversees their logistic and their technology unit. He has experience in robbery homicide investigations, personnel and training, firearms, and also the defensive tactic unit. He's testified in court as a use of force expert, computer and cellular examiner, and fraud investigator. And our moderator for today's event is someone I've known for many years, and it's such a privilege and honor to not only introduce him, but also call him friend well before my years in public service for the last 30 some odd years. Skip Townsend is a well-known member of the South LA community. He's going to be our moderator today. He is the founder and CEO of Second Call. Second Call is a community-based organization designed to save lives by reducing violence and assisting in the personal development of high-risk individual, proven offenders, ex-felons, and parolees, and others that society disregards. He's an executive board member of the Southern California Ceasefire Committee. He's also been selected to the District Attorney's Office Advisory Council for Victim Services. So it's with great honor to have Skip Townsend be a part of this panel as a moderator. And real briefly, because this could be a session in and of itself, the history of policing in America. Many are unaware that the roots of American policing began in the institution of slavery. It began with the slave patrols, and these patrols were designed to return enslaved individuals back to their masters. These individuals oftentimes, once they were returned, were further abused and beaten, but the slave patrols primarily resulted in the primary means by which they were able to achieve this was through violence, intimidation, torture, and fear tactics. And the first slave patrols began in the 1700s. And these patrols were pretty much vigilantes. And these individuals had the authority to go into anyone's home, regardless of race or ethnicity, and retrieve or look for escaped enslaved individuals. After the Civil War ended, the slave patrols continued, but however, they continued in another formation enforcing the Black codes. And the Black codes were pretty much those codes that dictated, Black voting rights, intimidation of Black individuals that were attempting to live in America and have the same freedoms that were afforded to others. And then we went into the Jim Crow period where these same individuals, oftentimes under the guise of the KKK and other forces, these were individuals that were embedded oftentimes in police departments, and they were also responsible for the enforcement of segregation, the racial covenants, the white-only issues with segregating Black to unequal status throughout the South and other parts of the country. So there's the roots of where American law enforcement, and again, until this history is not only taught for most police academies, we will continue to have some of the issues, because again, there's a direct correlation between what's going on today, the institution of racial issues in police departments directly connected to the issues from its beginning. That's a high level overview. And with that, I'll turn it over to the moderator, Skip Townsend, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. I want to make sure that I say thank you to everyone who has made this possible, everyone who's working behind the scenes, and also for the individuals who are giving their time and their energy being with us right now. If I can, want to thank God also for having the day and being able to be here with all of you. Let me get right into it. I want to make sure that the panelists understand that we will have 2 minutes to answer these questions. We have some great questions that have been given to us, and we want to make sure that other people are able to ask questions so we can do question and answers. So I want to just ask the panelists if we can keep our comments down to 2 minutes or less. Let's get to the point so that we can go through all the different questions that we have here. I'm going to ask that when I ask the question, it might be specific to 1 or 2 panelists, but if you feel the need to chime in as a third panelist, you can also do that. So let me get started with a question that I would like 3 of you to think about. What do you believe needs to be done to begin the process of bridging the gap between Black community and police officers? I'll start with you, Daryl. You're closest, probably from Beverly Hills and coming from LAPD and directly from USC. Why don't you take that on first, if you don't mind?
I feel that a way to bridge the gap is to find a way to understand what's going on, and to get out your car and actually speak to people, see what's going on. In regards to this question, I had asked a few of my friends actually that live in the inner city, and I'm gonna just read you some of their responses. One of my buddies, he said that he feels that the average person is more comfortable speaking to people that look like him. So he went on to say that, when you're policing in a minority area, whether it be Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, whatever the case is, they tend to go towards their race for the help. So he was saying that having more minorities in the policing those areas, because he feels that would be more, it'd be more comfortable to speak to a police officer, because he kind of believes that they've been through some of the same struggles that he's been through. I talked to another friend who mentioned that that a way to bridge the gap is to hold each other accountable. He said there's a lots of things where police are, you see these tragic events, and he's saying that you don't see many officers speaking out against it, which gives him the belief that they would do it also. So when you see different events going on or things like that, to speak against it. And then he mentioned just going more viral and live with, basketball events with the kids, or making seeing police fun and not more of a scary ordeal. Like usually when the average person in a minority city sees a police officer, they're not really excited to see that police officer. It's more like, uh-oh, what did I do? Like, am I going to get, detained? Am I going to get questioned? And like, it's more of like a sense of fear rather than someone that's there to help them. So I feel that the best thing to do is, really to just, not always be so strict, but sometimes just get out and ask someone how they're doing. Go, buy somebody food, a homeless person food, besides just, kick them out of the area and stuff like that. Just kind of connect with people and get out of that shell of being a police officer and let people know that we're actually human.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that from you. Appreciate your answers and the fact that you asked other officers or other people as well. Thank you for that. Sergeant, would you speak to that as well? That you want me to repeat the question just to make sure that you're on point. What do you believe needs to be done to begin the process of bridging the gap between the police department and the Black community?
Communication. Communication is key. I think on both sides, if there is an issue, there has to be an honest discussion regarding what took place. In that of if it's a more of a police procedural issue, explaining that. But if it's more than that, that needs to be discussed and addressed also. At the same time, if there's something that is not a racial issue, I think we've got to be honest about that also. Specifically, I remember there was an incident a few years ago in the Valley where a woman and her boyfriend, might remember correctly, were having sex in the car. Someone called in, and the allegation was that it was racially motivated because, if I remember correctly, he was white and she was black. Once everything was investigated, I remember community groups coming out and actually, saying they were wrong, in that the two people who made the complaint, saying that it was racially motivated when in fact it wasn't. And I think that sometimes distracts from real problems that are out there. And I think communication is key.
Yes, sir. Well said. I do want to highlight, though, that is there a way to not minimize the fact that sometimes things racially motivated, and can, when times when it's not, make it seem like it never is?
Yeah. And I think that's where, sometimes there can't be, from the law enforcement's perspective, sometimes there have to be investigations, and sometimes those investigations don't occur overnight. Sometimes they do take time. But I think the key is that we look into those things, and then once we have a conclusion or some type of decision or more information, then those discussions should take place.
Thank you, Sergeant, for that. Talking to you too, I have to see my therapist now. I have to ask Dr. Ray. How do you see it, Dr. Ray? What are some of the things that we need to bridge the gap with the Black community and law enforcement?
Well, I have to agree with what Officer Glover and Sergeant Sumlin, and kind of highlight what they're saying about communication and interaction. When thinking about this question, I kind of came up with 4 points, 4 key things that I think needs to happen, from my interactions with officers, and even talking to specifically Black officers about, during this time when, George Floyd was happening, and what needs to be done to improve our relationship with the community. And the first thing they said was positive interaction, which is, knowing your community, communicating with your community, interacting positively with your community, knowing who your business owners are in your community, knowing the needs of the community. I know it's a big task. I know officers feel like, okay, I'm going in there and I have to, complete a mission here. But, there are times when there's time available to kind of walk around your community, understand the needs of the community, frequent some of the businesses, increase your patronage in these businesses, even on off times. Hey, let me go down here to the Black community and just, have a burger at this business, or, buy some products from this small business owner, just getting to know. The other thing that I think is important that Officer Glover touched upon was accountability. And I think, when these incidents happen, this is the problem. We don't necessarily, we kind of slap people on the wrist and say, okay, let's not do it again. But, we all have to hold each other accountable. We know that, with these incidents, there were long rap sheets of complaints with officers, especially the officer who killed George Floyd. He had over 20 complaints, and nothing necessarily had been done. And so there has to be an increased accountability on our officers, not only in the department, but of course in our judicial system. The other thing I think, that was touched upon is increasing minority officers on the street. We have to do more of making sure, and it's true, like I feel comfortable talking to an officer that looks like me, whether it be a Black officer or even a female officer. We have to increase our minority presence in our community. And then the last thing is changing our perceptions of who our community members are. What do you think about the Black community? What is your idea of what a Black person is and who they, their purpose in life and all of that? I mean, getting to, having a positive viewpoint of our community and making sure that you don't think I'm just going into community just to arrest and fight crime. You're actually going in there like, I'm actually going to provide safety and security and serve and make sure this community is, improved and better. So that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Dr. Ray. And what you just touched upon is something that Chief Thomas just spoke on when he spoke about the history of law enforcement. What is their purpose? And even going back to the 1960s in Los Angeles, what was the purpose of law enforcement? Was to keep certain individuals, groups of people, and just keeping it real from not crossing Alameda one way and not crossing the 110 freeway the other way. We still had the Fair Housing Act that went on until 1968. So we just have to be aware that this is systemic, and to change not only a culture, not only change a country, but to change law enforcement, it's definitely going to take decades. So I appreciate all three of you. I want to go to the next question now, which for the Black officers is very important. Let's talk about wellness, and I'm going to continue with you, Dr. Ray. Is there what is the wellness? How do we help the Black officers, get well, get treatment? Other than yourself, I've been told in Alabama and also with LAPD that most officers will run from any sort of treatment that has anything to do with therapy. So how do we encourage the wellness?
Well, it's about, we have to reduce the stigma that mental health means that if we get mental health services that we are crazy, something is wrong with us. I think it's getting better. It's obviously better than 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Black people and, people of color are utilizing services at a higher rate than they did many years ago. What we still have to be out there and present and educate about the importance of improving our mental health. I always tell people that you're going to the doctor to get a physical every year, and you're making sure that you're physically well. Your brain and your mind is part of that overall health. You have to have good thinking, good behavior, good decision making, good relationships. Having good relationships is part of mental wellness. And so it's important that we continue to educate. We have associations here in Dallas. We have major Black psychological associations and mental health associations in these big cities, and we need to be, out there and present. Here specifically in the police department and in our major police departments, I do know that there are a number of psychologists, social workers, therapists who are employed or contracted with our major departments to provide counseling services and family services, which is a big deal. It's not just for our officers. We offer services for their spouses, partners, for their children, and anyone who's living in the home. We offer it for free. We offer it unlimited. We offer it, it's confidential. It's so there's a lot of officers who worry about, will my sergeant, will my my captain, my lieutenant know that I'm coming here? And we absolutely tell them, no, you will not. Your identity and your treatment will not be discussed with anybody outside of our office. And so it's important to have those types of services available. We also have peer support services available if, officers don't feel comfortable talking to someone like me who's a civilian and they want to talk to someone who is actually doing the job they're doing and looks like them. We have an excellent peer support program here in Dallas. I'm certain there are peer support programs available in major departments all over the country where, these are volunteers. They're not being paid. They're volunteering their time, and they're available pretty much 24/7 for whenever the officer needs it. So we're doing trainings and, wellness workshops. We're doing a lot of things to make sure that officers have the available resources and coping strategies that they can, manage their stress out there, because we know that this is a stressful job.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. One of the things you stated was that sometimes they might be fearing that information, or that their sergeants or their captains would know. Don't need a response, but let's think about how can we take away that fear? Because I need my sergeant to know that I'm going to therapy. I need them to know that I'm becoming a healthier person. I don't want to be stigmatized that something's wrong with me. So let my captain know, but I don't, of course, I'm speaking from non-law enforcement. I don't know how that feels to actually have to go to work tomorrow and just saw a therapist. But thank you for what you offer. And I'm gonna ask you, Sergeant Sumlin, if you could speak to wellness at Santa Monica. And, the one thing I do say about Santa Monica is you guys stole our chief from Inglewood, Jacqueline Seabrook. So I really have this thing with Santa Monica because she was great in the city of Inglewood. But is there anything that's offered to Santa Monica for you guys for wellness?
Yes, very similar to as the doctor was saying, we have a peer support group, both sworn and civilian personnel that are available if anyone has any type of problem to contact them 24 hours a day. We have available to them police psychologists if need be, with the idea that confidentiality is key. There are things that people may have nothing to do with work whatsoever that they may need to talk to someone about. And it's ensured to them that those conversations will be kept confidential. But I think the big thing is ego. We are type A personality in this profession. For a lot of people, their solution to a problem is a bottle. Unfortunately, that can sometimes cause another problem. So it's got to be that willingness to talk to someone, no matter who it is, regarding a problem that you're having, and trying to find a solution to it that doesn't make things even worse. And we had her first.
Yes, indeed, you did. I just got to go back to that, because what you just described in law enforcement is what I could describe in the apartment building I grew up in, or in the park that I would hang out at. Their problems, their obstacles, their challenges, where most of the community members will run to a bottle or grab something to smoke, as opposed to dealing with these situations, these circumstances. So I'm so glad that you said that, because the issues and problems are one and the same. So thank you for that. Mr. Glover, sir, if you would share, I don't know, Beverly Hills has everything, man. You guys have to have something for wellness, right?
Yes, sir. So first, I like to say that I believe officers need to realize that it's a person issue. A lot of officers become numb to like the traumatic events because of how often it occurs. So first, just realizing that this isn't normal. It's not normal to see people dead, or it's not normal to see people getting beat, and the traumatic events that occur. So that's when I was in LAPD. It was certain things or certain assignments that I've worked where I worked South Bureau Homicide there for 2 years. So it was not out of the ordinary for me 3 times a day to see, someone deceased due to gun violence or something like that. So that type of stuff, you kind of get used to it, and that's not normal. So at Beverly Hills, though, we have peer support groups that helps the sworn. We have like a clinical therapist available as a resource. We actually got our gym renovated. So, a lot of they pretty much cover the physical, emotional, and mental health. And I feel that all of that, it all works itself out. And we have a lot of support over there.
Right. I wasn't too sure when you said it all works itself out. I'll come back to that. You didn't sound confident when you said that. But I appreciate it. I'm glad that the one thing that I did here was peer-to-peer support, because, as Dr. Ray had stated, a lot of sworn officers may not want to talk to a civilian. So glad you guys have that. So I'm gonna stay with you, Daryl. Growing up in Carson, California, and I want to ask this next question about, have you ever had a negative encounter? I can speak highly for LAPD and the Inglewood Police Department, but what about those sheriffs? They ever get you in Carson? You ever Tell us about any negative, maybe even coming home from work or off duty type thing. Have you ever had a negative encounter?
I've never had a negative encounter with like Carson sheriffs. One thing was actually the only event I've ever had was once in Inglewood. I was leaving a friend's house at about maybe like 10:30 at night, stopped at this red light. I literally seen the police officer maybe a block away, going the opposite direction as I was going. So I'm traveling north and he's traveling south. I just left a red light. I'm going about 25 miles per hour. He conducts a U-turn, gets behind me, and starts asking me multiple questions. Hey, where are you going? Like I was in the wrong area. I couldn't be there. So after he asked, like, hey, I'm gonna search, do you have anything on you? No, I was about 20 years old at the time. No, I don't have anything on me. Can I search your car? I didn't know any better. Yeah, absolutely. He searches the car and everything comes back good. So he allows me to get back into my car. Then he tells me, hey, well, I'm going to go ahead and write you a ticket for speeding. And I know for a fact I wasn't speeding, but I didn't know what to do about that situation. I've never been pulled over before. It was my first time. And now I'm getting pulled over and cited for something I did not do. It will be my word against his word in court. And it left an uncomfortable feeling for me. And that's minor compared to things that other people have been through. So myself, that's the only thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because I knew I did nothing wrong but could do nothing about it.
Well, I want to not minimize your experience, because what's trauma to you may not be trauma to someone else. But
Yeah.
it seems traumatizing to be in a position where someone can say I did something and I know I didn't.
Yeah. So I mean, that would literally be the only thing. But besides that, I've had no bad encounters.
That was bad enough. Appreciate you, Daryl. Sergeant Sumlin, has this ever happened to you, or do you wear your uniform all day?
All the time. Never get stopped. I born, raised, still live in South Central. And once again, this is my perception, or at least my experience. I've never been stopped by the police for an illegitimate reason. Younger days, registration may have been out, light may have been out, stopped, contacted. Officers were always professional with me. That's been my experience. But it's funny you mentioned the sheriff's department, though. So probably in the mid 90s, I was working undercover at the time, and we had borrowed some deputies from West Hollywood stations to do some work for us. One of the deputies had a report to do, so the other deputies left. I take them back to their station later on that evening, probably about 11 o'clock at night. I drop them off in front of their station, and on their Santa Monica Boulevard side, they have a gate that leads into their station area. Well, I pull up, deputy gets out, we speak briefly. As he's walking towards the gate is opening for a car coming out. Sheriff's car, as it comes out, immediately turns on its lights and sirens as I start pulling away. I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's somebody who I know. I went to the Sheriff's Academy, so maybe it's one of my classmates. I pull over. The deputy walks up to my car, tells me I was impeding traffic, tells me to get out of the car. I'm in an undercover car. I've got police equipment all in the backseat of the car. I explained to her who I am, tell her what I was doing, was dropping off one of your deputies, and that I am armed. The deputy has me to step out of the car. Step out of the car, have me to step on the curb, has me to face them, and they proceed to pat me down face to face. Feels that I have a gun on me, never asked for my badge, asked for my driver's license. And I'm like, okay, somebody's messing with me at this point. But they're serious. Give them my license, they look at it, hand me back my license, tell me don't impede traffic in their city, as they walk back to their car and they drive away. Kind of think about it for a minute, get back in my car. I'm a little upset, needless to say. It's a Friday night, I sleep on it over the weekend, come back to work on Monday. I'm a little hot. I called the deputy who I had dropped off and speak to him about it. And he was like, yeah, I thought the person knew you. I didn't think anything of it. And I explained to him what had occurred. And, I didn't want to make a complaint, but I told him, I said, hey, can you talk to this person? Because probably not the safest officer safety techniques. They put me on hold, eventually put me together with their internal affairs unit. I told them, I said, I'm not trying to make a complaint. And what they told me was that same weekend, that deputy wound up getting arrested for drunk driving by the CHP. And the deputy was booked into the sheriff's department. So karma comes around sometimes long afterwards and sometimes rather quickly sometimes.
All right, man, that's traumatic, brother. So I appreciate your outlook. You have a positive outlook on it, but just imagine people who aren't in law enforcement position who might have complained about that deputy was just thrown away, like, the deputy. So I'm grateful for you sharing that. I want to come to Dr. Ray, and I want to ask you, Dr. Ray, have you ever had a similar situation? And then I have another question for you after you share that.
Okay, so I, like other two officers, I probably haven't had any serious negative interactions with the police. I'll have to say most interactions have been positive. I have a funny story though. When I was first, my freshman year at USC, I was 18 years old and no interactions with police at that point. But I did do something that I wasn't supposed to do. I jaywalked across Jefferson Avenue, Jefferson Boulevard, and got stopped by LAPD and didn't know what was going on. And of course, it's my first experience in Los Angeles, and I'm 18 years old. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm being stopped by the police. And they said, you can't, it's against the law for you to jaywalk or, cross the street outside of the crosswalk. And I was like, oh, okay, of course, my heart's beating fast. And, and then after that, I probably didn't have many more interactions with LAPD after that. But, and over the years, you just stop for a ticket, or, I've lived in other states. In one state in particular, when I lived on the East Coast, and I used to travel back and forth from DC to Virginia, everyone kind of knows that Virginia Highway Patrol or Virginia troopers are a little hard, and you don't want to be stopped by them. They dress a little different, look a little different, mostly white. And, I was used to driving in an HOV lane and all that, and got stopped for being in the HOV lane. And just, it's not, of course, these are my responsibilities, my fault, but it's nerve-wracking to be stopped by the police, and it's to be stopped by white police officers oftentimes. I do feel differently when I'm stopped by Black police officers than white police officers. So I think there's a sort of this vicarious trauma that we experience, especially as we, see these incidents occur over the years of police brutality, that, what if today I'm being stopped today? What if this is going to go wrong? What do I do?
But listen, I want to ask a question that was asked by the audience in response to trauma. So we're right at the right topic. Is there a compound trauma for Black law enforcement officers? And how do the police officers respond to trauma? So not the community that's being pulled over or feel that trauma, but what about officers? Is there a compounded trauma for them?
Well, definitely. I think Officer Glover touched upon this before. It's like you don't really know how to handle, you're seeing things every day that is basically not normal for humans to see every day. We're not out there, killing animals, and killing for food or anything. I mean, to see someone dead, or to see, a child being hurt, or, a suicide that will occur, or, here in Dallas, we had an ambush in 2016 where 5 officers tragically lost their lives. That's not normal to see. And, but often officers have to kind of, all right, let me get it together because I got to go back out there tomorrow or the next day, and I got to do my job, and I can't let my emotions kind of get the best of me. And so, yeah, they do hold it in, and all these things kind of come out in different ways, whether it's, you touched upon substance abuse, there's there might be abuse of substances, there might be relationship problems, untreated mental health problems. I saw this a lot with working with veterans. They went to war and saw, unspeakable tragedies, and they kept it in. And then once they got out of the military, then it starts to hit them, and they have to think about it, and they're at home and they're not sleeping, and they're reliving these experiences. So it might be common for officers to kind of keep it in for their entire career, for 30 years. Let me keep it together. And then boom, after retirement, you're dealing with, okay, I'm not an officer anymore. I mean, purpose is different in your life. And then these things start flooding back in. And then that's when they want to come in for counseling, when I think that things should be addressed. Probably soon after incidents, we try to make sure that any critical incidents that happen with our officers, whether it's officer-involved shooting or a death that they've witnessed, that they come in and actually talk to us, and we can assess for trauma symptoms. And we do that in intervals. So like immediately, then 3 months, then 6 months, to just make sure that they're okay. But we try to keep track, but it is going to be on them to come in and say, hey, I'm not doing too well after this event, but a lot of them don't do it, and it does impact them.
Okay, so let me do this real quick. I want to ask you, Sergeant Sumlin, about, so I have a question about George Floyd, but what I want to do is incorporate one of the questions that's in the question and answer, and it says, has any of these officers, so I'm gonna ask you, having to hold their colleagues accountable for discrimination actions or stand against certain behaviors? So just think about George Floyd's situation, where this officer is going above and beyond and actually about to take a life. Have you ever experienced that in your 30 odd years of being a police officer, where someone is going above and beyond? Or have you, in your department, where someone has had to address these issues or stand against these behaviors?
Sure. I mean, yeah, we've had to deal with some issues similar to that in my department. I personally have never been in a position where I've witnessed someone doing that, but I have, as a robbery homicide investigator, investigated a case of an officer and had to arrest him, and eventually had charges filed against him for assault under the color of authority. It's not easy, but the thing is, though, as a police officer, we take an oath. And that oath is very important. So, you've got to follow through with what you have promised to do when you take that oath and you take on the responsibility of being a police officer.
Thank you for that. I have another question. I'm going to ask you, Officer Glover. There's a filmmaker who's doing a story about police brutality. What would you find offensive if you were to see a movie, or have you seen a movie before, and you find that there is something offensive way that law enforcement is portrayed? What would you think would be offensive?
I mean, that's a good question. I feel that a lot of movies now, they depict a certain image that I would say was, well, we have body cameras and things like that now. We have, like the city of Beverly Hills, we have over 300 fixed cameras. We're wearing body cameras, our vehicle has cameras. So a lot of actions that the officers do are all recorded, and officers know that. So a lot of the ways they work is to, please, it's like to put on a show, like, you know what I mean? So we know everything is recorded. So a lot of that extra stuff that probably used to happen prior to me being a police officer doesn't occur as often. Now in movies, they depict, I guess, certain events that they've seen or certain things that they've been through. And I mean, I don't really get offended because, that's their interpretation of how law enforcement is. But what I think sucks is the picture that they're throwing out for everyone else to kind of gravitate towards their idea of police officers. A lot of the officers do their job. Most officers I came in contact with does their job to the best of their ability, and they don't have the intention of going out to hurt anyone. And I know that from firsthand experience. There's been multiple calls I've been on where, according to policy, that person's life could have ended due to their actions. And the officers, restrained or came with a different de-escalation tactic, or, went ahead and just went hands-on in a situation where that person could have been shot because they're swinging a knife or swinging a bat or, something like that. So, I mean, to
Okay,
answer the question, oh, go
can I
ahead.
call time out real quick? Because
Yeah,
the second question is exactly that. So for university students who are at USC or wherever, whatever college they're at, how should they interact with law enforcement in the situation that you were in when they know that they did not have a violation? How
Mhm.
should they respond to law enforcement when they're saying that they made a violation and they're knowing that they didn't? I mean, it's different with Dr. Ray. She knew Jefferson Boulevard was dangerous and there's lots of dead cats and squirrels on Jefferson, so she should have knew, but for your situation,
When you did nothing wrong and you're kind
all
of,
right,
if I was in that situation now, what I would have done is just requested to speak to a supervisor. Request to speak to a supervisor, explain my side, and go from there. That's what I mean, when I'm talking to my buddies, if they go into or they're dealing with certain situations, hey, request a supervisor. And then, try to get it handled along those lines. But going to do the arguing and fighting with the cop or being defiant, like that's not going to make the situation better. I kind of go with the mindset of survive the encounter. Once you're detained or once you're dealing with that officer, obey his orders. If you feel that you were treated unjustly at any point, after he's done with his investigation, request to speak to a supervisor and explain it to them. But that's the mindset I've always had. My parents taught me, and what I tell my friends: just survive the encounter, and if you feel you were treated unjustly, speak to a supervisor.
all right, appreciate that. And Sergeant Sumlin,
Yeah.
there's been, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add on that too, is that, if you're talking to a supervisor regarding, you should be talking to a supervisor regarding issue of something that's out of policy versus the merits of the ticket. If the argument is about the merits of the ticket, that's why you take it to court.
All right, excellent. And you said something earlier too about policies, and for the most part, the community doesn't know the policies of law enforcement. So we'll stand on the same corner, looking at the same thing from two different angles. But my question to you is: there's been a lot of people talking about defund the police. Tell me some of your feedback and how you feel about defunding law enforcement.
Me being a citizen of the city of Los Angeles, I do not want the police defunded as a citizen, period. I think people want a safe community. And I don't think that defunding the police is the solution to that. I think there needs to be discussion. One of the things our department does now and has been doing for years is we have community policing. And also we have I'm trying to think of the term that we use now, but basically we have a citizens academy, whereas you can come for several weeks and learn what we do at the police department. So you have a better understanding of what we do and why we do certain things. And I think that goes into, like we started at the very beginning, talking about communication. There has to be communication. I think for a lot of people, their understanding of what the police department do is from what they see on TV. Every year or every television season, there is a new police show of some type. People find it interesting, but that's entertainment. It's not real life, what the police department does. And I think our Citizens Academy is great at doing that, teaching people what we do and why we do it, and our policies.
Yes, indeed. All right, so here, let me do this because of time. Let me ask you, Dr. Ray, is there anything that you wanted to leave the group with real quick in 30 seconds, if you could?
I kind of wanted to address this, defund the police. I think defund is a term that's kind of like misperceived or confusing. I agree with Sergeant that, getting rid of police departments, especially in these major cities, probably wouldn't be beneficial. It's very counterproductive. I need the police. As a woman who, lives, alone, and I I need to know that I can call the police. But I also want people to know that police departments contain very good people. And, you know, we have to understand that there's these bad apples that spoil the bunch. And I understand the anger and, you know, the confusion and wanting to all this change and justice. And that's wonderful. But we do have to do it from the inside. And if we don't have police departments, then change can't happen. So we want to feel safe. Police officers want to feel safe. We want to eliminate this fear. And so I think that we have to really kind of come together, community departments, to make sure that we're doing a good job and that we're serving one another.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. I'm gonna go ahead and thank you, panelists, for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you guys and get the information so that the community could hear. I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Southers, and once again, thank you, Chief Thomas. Thank you all the help for allowing this to happen today. Thank you for having me.
Well, Skip, thank you for a fantastic job of moderating this incredible panel. Dr. Ray, Officer Glover, Sergeant Sumlin, and Maury, you and I go back many, many, many years working together. My brother, thank you for being here today. I want to thank everyone for joining us for this incredibly important topic on policing while Black. I also want to thank our co-sponsors of the event, the USC Black Alumni Association and Ms. Tensie Taylor, who does a fantastic job of running that organization, our illustrious USC Department of Public Safety Chief, John Thomas, but most importantly, my colleague and my boss, Jesse Redd, who's the academic program specialist at the Safe Communities Institute, who makes all of this go. For those of you who joined us today, we will be posting the video after it's ready. We have incredible technology people at USC led by Jonathan Schwartz, who's our communications and technology guru. So once we get that edited, it'll be on our site, the Safe Communities Institute at sci.usc.edu. So I'd ask you to go there. Please also go there to check out the upcoming events that we have, our numerous programs and courses that we offer that Jesse runs. But I really want to thank all of you for joining us today for a very timely and very important discussion on policing while Black. Please be safe, practice social distancing, and I wish you all a good day. Thank you very much.